So it's May 30th, 1994. This morning, the Security Council passed Resolution 918, which reaffirmed its condemnation of the violence in Rwanda. There was a move to add the word genocide to this resolution because of evidence coming out of the country, but the United States squashed that. There was also affirmation of organizing a primarily African-driven peacekeeping force to land in Kigali to try to calm things down. But there was debate on who would pay for this 9,000-person peacekeeping force, and unfortunately, the United States refused to pay for any heavy equipment moving into Rwanda. So this peacekeeping force stood down on the border. May 30th, that would mean today was, as the sun set, day 54 in a 100-day genocide that would ultimately kill 1 million men, women, and children. In mid-July, when the genocide ended, you would assume that Rwanda, just like Somalia, a couple hundred miles north, was a failed state. In October the previous year, an American Black Hawk helicopter was downed by rebels, and we quickly evacuated any interest in that country. And Rwanda in mid-July, with millions of internally displaced refugees, a decimated government, and bodies lying in streets or in mass graves. You'd be excused for assuming that for the next few years or even decades, it would be a country torn by warlords and refugees, and basically a destabilizing point in East Africa. Fortunately for East Africa and the continent and for all of us, Rwanda did not live up to its destiny. If you ask people today in Rwanda, and I've asked many people in Rwanda, how is it that 19 years later Rwanda is this remarkable turnaround story, they will say it's the leadership. It's the leadership. So what did the leadership do differently in Rwanda than leadership in many other countries that have gone through similar conflict? What did they do differently? Why is it that today Rwanda is achieving remarkable growth? Between 2000 and 2012, they averaged 8.2% GDP growth. 2 weeks ago, Rwanda floated a $400 billion bond on the world market to build a new international airport, build a new conference center, pay down some very expensive debt that it had on its books. To show some illustration of how the world's markets felt about Rwanda, it was oversubscribed 8 times. Just this week, in a meeting of the Millennium Development Goals, Rwanda was actually voted the #1 country among 48 African countries as making progress against their MDG goals. A remarkable turnaround story. What made the difference, and what lessons can we learn? Yesterday we talked a bit about the oil curse, the curse of countries that have oil and what happens to it. There's also an aid curse. The curse of when aid is poured into a country and it basically gets blocked at the top, and there's corruption, and it never really gets down to the people that need the aid, and frankly the country never turns around. It's not a sustainable solution. The leadership in Rwanda said, we've seen that model, we've seen that it doesn't work. Yes, we need aid. Right after the genocide, 90% of the Rwandan budget was paid for by the international community. Now it's way below 50%. But part of it became because they said, we're gonna forge a different path. Essentially, the leadership convened a national conversation about where are we gonna go. And out of that came a document called Vision 2020. Vision 2020 essentially says that we want to become the very first African country to move from poor status to middle income status in 1 generation. And what will it take? And when they started thinking about what will it take, they came down to, okay, so we're a landlocked country. What can we do about that? Well, you could either think of us as a landlocked country, or you could think of us as a hub. We're the hub for East Africa. So what do? Let's create great transportation, a great international airport. Let's create great hospitality. Let's create a great education system, attorneys, accountants. Let's just create an environment where business can happen. Well, how can business happen in a country that had just been war-torn? Well, there's a couple things you need to put in place first. And the leadership said, the only way we're going to attract outside investment is if this is a safe country. So safety became number one. I've been to Rwanda over 20 times. I've walked the streets at midnight. I've walked all over that country. It's one of the safest countries in Africa. Secondly, if we're going to get outside investment, we have to eliminate corruption. Outside investors are not going to come and invest in a country where you have to pay people off. I've never been asked for a bribe. The level of corruption, it still exists, obviously, but it's the kind of thing that once it's found out, it's eliminated. They began to create an environment where business actually could happen. I've spent many years serving on boards of essentially USAID-funded NGOs, and about 4 years ago, I had this epiphany that said, you know, NGOs have a place, but I'm an entrepreneur, and frankly, I think entrepreneurs are the most powerful change agents in the world. Maybe I should be finding entrepreneurs in these countries I'm working in, not just coming in with expats to do a job. Maybe we should go in and find those entrepreneurs and help them figure out how to do the job, because they're not going anywhere. So, long story, serendipity. Sometimes you don't leave serendipity to chance, Rob, but serendipity led me to Rwanda. And I found this country that was making, it was not Hotel Rwanda, let me just say that, which was the brand image that I had in my mind. It was remarkable what was beginning to happen. But I observed that there was something I call the missing middle. There was a very strong, mature microcredit, microfinance in place, Grameen Bank, Kiva, Opportunity International, and obviously a very mature bilateral loan grant program. But where there was not a lot of attention being paid was at the level of the entrepreneur, the small, medium-sized business owner. This isn't the entrepreneur who wants to create a business plan and wants to start something or just graduated from school. Yeah, that's important. What I was looking for are the people like me who had going concerns, that had been in business for 3-5 years, had employees, had revenue. If we could somehow find a way to leverage them, to give them the kind of juice that they needed, or the vision, or the connections, they're the ones that are going to create the jobs, create the wealth, create the demand for good education, create the demand for good security. They're the ones that will really move this country forward. So over that first year, evolved this program where essentially focusing on intellectual capital, social capital, and financial capital. How do we identify the most promising high potential businesses that could have the biggest impact in terms of job creation and wealth creation, and surround them with really the best ideas, global ideas on how to grow firms and grow them quickly. The social capital, the networks of people that we have in the United States, Canada, Europe, that actually can help them grow faster. And then for those that are ready for financial investment, the capital to move into those companies. I have a lot of fantastic success stories that I could tell you about. Lidi Hakizimana, when I first met her 3 years ago, she had a small little publishing company of about 8 people. Now she has over 250 people scattered all over the country, and she is a serious mover and shaker. Robert Buyagamba had a furniture manufacturing company. Now he's got over 100 employees. He's buying another company in Burundi next door. And he's just started to invest in solar hot water heaters. Sam Dargan is bringing solar to villages all over Rwanda. Rwanda it's called the nation or the country of 1,000 hills. The problem is it's hard to get electricity to all those little villages in 1,000 hills. Only 90% of the country's on the grid. There's huge opportunity for alternative solar in the country because it's going to be years before they would ever get actual lines of power to those villages. Lots of great opportunities, and in some ways, this is a model for how you move a country from conflict and disaster into one using entrepreneurialism.